my hope is that one thing it can do is raise an awareness of, amongst philanthropists and those involved in philanthropy, of where they sit in a kind of rich history of giving within the UK, and thereby give them a sense that they're not necessarily alone, and they don't have to try and discover the answers to all of the questions that they have for the first time for themselves. I think in terms of how it might affect public attitudes, that very much depends on how many people read it and the opportunities that I get to tell them about it. But I would hope, in all seriousness, that some of the insights that come from looking at the history, either the ones that I outline in this book or the ones that other people take from it, can be of great use, as I suggest, in providing some perspective on some of the criticisms that are levelled at charities at the moment, some of which John alluded to, and some of which I've talked about around, the engagement of charities in political advocacy, some of the criticisms around the way charities operate. These are actually debates that have been had before, usually at least once, and by failing to take any account of that, we're probably doing ourselves a disservice because we're not giving ourselves an opportunity to learn from what happened in those previous instances. I certainly do. I mean, in the book, I had to slightly skirt around it because the question of absolutely defining where philanthropy stops and, say, charitable giving starts is quite a difficult one. I don't think it is about amounts. I think there are some defining characteristics of philanthropy. Largely ones to do with, I think philanthropy is something that has purpose in mind. It's not just a reactive act of giving that's focused on how you feel about making that donation. It is something that is intended to address a particular issue. It's something you do because you're angry about something and you want to change it. So it's something where you have an aim in mind and you are using your giving as a tool in order to address that. I think in terms of tracing the history of it, I hope I have addressed that, and certainly where I alluded to the question of the rise of associational philanthropy. Obviously, in the end, that resulted in organisations that relied on smaller numbers of subscriptions from people with less to give, and that trend obviously continued into the 20th century and led to the situation we have today, which is where mass market charitable giving seems more the norm and is the kind of thing that we associate more when we talk about the sector and about voluntary action. The use of the term philanthropy is both helpful and not helpful in terms of framing these books. It's useful when it comes to a chapter, say, considering criticisms, because I think a lot of those are ones that are more aimed at those with large amounts of money attempting to use their giving as a way of kind of having influence on society and on social problems. I think in those chapters I probably haven't focused as much on mass market charitable giving, but in terms of the kind of the broad trends of philanthropy and the move towards charitable organisations getting more involved in campaigning and the importance of that role, and also the role that they play increasingly in delivering services on behalf of the state, it definitely does consider that aspect of things. But I would certainly, I think having read the book, if you wanted to make that as a criticism, it's one that I would be willing to take on board and robustly face. I think it's interesting you say, do you think this is an interesting new phenomenon? No, not at all. I mean, I think the use of visible displays of philanthropy to try and encourage others to give is far from a new phenomenon. I mean, it's the earliest days of philanthropy. I mean, one of the things I came across was in Tudor London. They used to basically have fairly overt and slightly distasteful eulogies for people, which went into large amounts of detail about the charitable gifts that they'd made, and exhorted other rich people to give, and that then was very effective in getting other rich people to give, and started to have that social phenomenon